Post-production effects. Let's talk about it. What does post-production even mean? In some circles, post-production refers to anything that happens after tracking and includes editing, mixing, and mastering. For our purposes, and in most metal circles, post-production just means extra zazz.
It needs zazz!
Think sound effects, explosions, subdrops, drones, ambience, extra percussion, Hollywood movie sounds, you get the picture. These are often used to help transition between parts or add emphasis to certain parts of the song as opposed to being part of the actual instrumentation. These are traditionally added after editing and before mix prep, but you can add these effects at any point in your production, making the term post-production slightly misleading. You can write a whole song around a post-production sound if you want to. There are no rules. If you're looking for specific tips or tricks, you'll have to wait till the end of the video or skip ahead. You've got options. But this video was requested by a buddy of mine, and I want to make sure that I cover what they were curious about, so here we go. Some people consider post-pro to mean anything that wasn't played on an actual instrument by a band member. But things can get a bit blurry here because most people are programming their drums these days, and most synth and keyboard parts are programmed. Hell, even bass is programmed in a lot of newer metal productions. Does that mean that everything besides guitar and vocals is post-pro? I think not. Where I make the distinction between post-production and instrumentation is how musical it is. If a synth was programmed to carry a prominent melody in the mix, I would consider that part of the instrumentation. A keyboard part, if you will. If it's a sound effect like an explosion or a drone or a synth with very little melodic content, I'd consider that post-production. All that being said, there are no fucking rules in music production, and there are even less rules when it comes to post-production. You can keep it subtle enough that you'd hardly notice if it were taken away, or you can make it such a prominent part of the mix that it's like an extra band member that you would need backing tracks for in live situations. Whatever floats your boat. Some people are dead set against using post-production and only want natural sounds in their music, which is kind of funny in metal since there's nothing natural about metal at all. But hey, it's a valid opinion. For my money, I like to go all in on post-production. I grew up on bands like White Zombie, Fear Factory, Neurosis, Rammstein, Nemec, and electronic-based groups like KMFDM and Nine Inch Nails. In my opinion, post-production can be every bit as important to a song as the guitars. This kind of stuff has only become more popular in recent years, and I'm all about it. There's no reason to limit ourselves unnecessarily. Unless you're trying to impress people with your all-natural metal productions, then you do you. How do we add post-production effects to our productions? The short answer, buy post-production sample packs where you literally drag and drop samples into your project. We get to pretend we're doing EDM or something that doesn't require any actual instrumentation and see how much easier we could have things if we just gave up playing instruments and just mashed up loops and samples all day. I kid. I actually really like some EDM. Some of my recent favorite sample packs for post-production are the Modern Metal Songwriter post-production effects pack. All of the JST sample packs are fucking great. I use the out of those on a lot of stuff. Native Instruments Komplete is like a huge bundle of way more sounds than you're ever going to need in metal, but I fucking love it. The stock Cubase sounds, there's a lot of cool stuff in that. If you happen to be on Cubase, if not, hopefully you might have some other DAW that came with some stuff. Recently, I've gotten into Liminal FX from Gabe Caraballo. He makes some really cool modular synth sounds that are like fucking out of this world. There are also subscription services like Splice if you're into subscription plans. I'm not, so I prefer to buy sample packs. You can also get into sound design or Foley if you really want to get creative, but for most of us, it's not really worth the time and effort. There are people who specialize in this sort of thing, and they make our lives much easier. Gabe Caraballo of Liminal FX specializes in making custom sounds for people's productions. So if you're worried about using the same samples as other people, but you don't have the time to get into sound design or Foley yourself, you can hire him to make some custom sounds for you, and they're going to fucking sound great. That's his thing, is post-production stuff. So if you want to hire a professional, I'll leave a link in the description. I also dabble in this stuff, but I wouldn't really consider it my specialty. You can also record any sounds you find on the internet if your interface has a loopback feature or you've got some fancy routing software on your computer. I'm not saying that this is legal, I'm just saying that it's possible. I'm also not saying that it's illegal. But in most cases, it probably is, so don't do it. Unless you want to, then do it. Whatever. That's a choice you'll have to make on your own. Many of the sounds that I use are random things that I've collected over the years and no longer remember the source, sadly. So like I'm talking samples that I've had for over 20 years. Always be ready to grab sounds for future use. Also, don't be afraid to use your guitar to create crazy sounds. Go crazy with effects and textures and just experiment with what you can create. Sometimes just holding a single note in a subtle way can really add a lot of vibe to a part. EBOs are also really fun. Before we get into specific tricks, I have a few notes. Keep your sample library organized. Mark your favorites to speed up future sessions. If you've built up a substantial library of sounds, it can be a good idea to have a few sessions where you just go through your sounds and curate a list of favorites. Trust me on this. Nothing kills creative momentum like searching through 8,457 sounds looking for the perfect one. Set these up ahead of time so that you can get to your favorites quickly and easily. Routing post-production effects around your mix bus compressor. You can send post-production sounds to their own bus aside from your main mix bus if you want to keep it sounding somewhat separate from the rest of the band. That is optional. The point is to bypass the mix bus compressor that the band is going through so that subdrops and explosions don't end up dropping the volume of the instruments, unless you want that to happen. Again, there are 0 rules for this. Sometimes it's fun to load samples into a sampler instead of dragging them onto the timeline. This lets you trigger the sample via MIDI, and you can even play the sample at different pitches like on a keyboard, depending on how your sampler is set up. Beware of out-of-tune samples in cheaper sample sets. I have a sample set of 808s that I don't use very often anymore because some of the samples are out of tune. I mean, like they're in between actual notes, so they need to be fine-tuned to get them to lock in with anything else. It's completely beyond me how you f something like that up, but there it is. You've been warned. My colleagues indicate that this is a common problem with less reputable sound peddlers. As far as I understand it, using any sound without permission is illegal, regardless of the length. I'm not saying that you'll get in trouble or even that you'll get caught, but understand that there is some risk involved in using sounds that you don't have any rights to. The owners may never find out that you used it, and even if they do, they might not care, but they also might be assholes about it, so be careful. Ambience. So this stuff is usually best for quiet parts and intros, because usually you're not even going to hear this if the full mix is going in a metal situation. So I'm not sure if this is the right vibe for this or not, but let's just plop it in, because this basically is a demonstration. Sounds kind of cool. I think I'm going to keep it, dude. Drones, tones, and string drags. These are great for subtle vibe, extra depth, or tension and anxiety. So I'm going to do that half-step interval thing. So I'm going to do F sharp and G. Arm the track, do a pre-roll, and record. Guitars as post effects. Sometimes things that are really simple and boring to play sound really cool when they're tucked into the mix. I'm talking like you can just hold a note behind a chorus and just tuck it just to where you can barely notice it, and it completely changes the whole vibe of the part, and it's fucking great. Clairvoyant, and on mid. Let's get some delay and reverb. So you can see we're just basically creating a fucking pitch, or like a tone, that is being sustained over time. .808s, booms, and subdrops. You can make these yourself, but why? You could also just buy the Modern Metal Songwriter subdrops pack for $20 and you'll be set for life. Okay, so 808s versus subdrops. So an 808 is basically just like a really long synthetic kick drum sound. Subdrops are similar to 808s, but they're basically a sine wave that starts at a certain pitch and then sweeps down to a lower pitch. So, you know, it'll actually sound like a drop, like. And they're used in similar situations to add emphasis to really big parts. Okay, there's a trick to getting these to sit right in the mix if you don't have a sub. So basically, you very lightly touch the speaker cone with your fingers or your thumb. You're not actually putting pressure, but you're just barely touching it so that you can feel the speaker excursions. Like you kind of compare it to the kick drum and how that's kind of making the speaker move. And then if the 808 suddenly comes in and it's like, and it moves it a whole bunch, then you've got way too much sub information. You're going to probably bring that down. You could also filter some of that bottom end out if it's too much. There's nothing worse than having an 808 just completely dominate your mix because it makes the rest of the mix sound like it's fucking weak and thin. So it's really important to get those right. So that's a trick. But that also works for kick and bass relationship and stuff like that. Right? There we go. All right, so one trick with subdrops, if you want it to be a little bit more audible, you can add a bit of distortion to it. But the cool thing about this sample pack is that you've got distorted drops in the motherfucker, so you can just fucking grab that fucking bitch and throw it the fuck in. Fucking job over. This is from JST. It's called Sub Destroyer, and it's actually a VST instrument. So I'm going to add an instrument track. So basically, this is a sine wave generator. Boom, there it is. Boom style. This thing's fucking sick too. Hits, impacts, and explosions. These are similar to 808s in that they provide extra impact to help accentuate a part and make it hit harder. I usually don't go too crazy with these because they can tend to sound a bit cheesy sometimes if they're too obvious. All right, now we're... Ooh, fart. All right, we're doing hits, impacts, and explosions. There we go. That's what I want. This one does not have a swell, so we can just fucking put it on the motherfucking grid. Bow style, motherfucker. All right, and then go to JST Kaoss Volume 1. Let's try slams. Bow style. A snare bomb is pretty much just a really loud snare hit with a bunch of reverb to give it a long tail. You can create this yourself by duplicating the snare hit that you want to turn into a bomb and putting it on its own track and adding a big long reverb to it. You'll need to play around with the reverb a little bit to get it to feel right. Or you can just buy the JST Snare Bomb pack and make your life way the f*** easier. Some people might worry that they'd be using the same samples that other people have. So fucking what? It's a fucking snare bomb. There are a bunch to choose from in this pack, and you'll find one that fits your mix. In my opinion, it's usually better if the snare bomb doesn't exactly match your main snare. It just needs to sound like a snare bomb. It's a sound effect. If you're on a budget, then absolutely make your own. But if you have the money, just buy the pack, drop in a sample that you like, and move on with your life. Done. If you're using a sample that still has the actual snare hit in it and isn't just the reverb decay by itself, you may want to experiment with trimming the actual snare out of the clip and keep just the decay so that the snare sample doesn't fight your main snare. But also sometimes it sounds great leaving it in. A lot of this is experimentation to just see what works in your specific scenario. So we want it right there. So those are your traditional snare bombs. A snare with a fucking bunch of reverb. And that's what makes this fucking pack awesome. Oh, I want that one. Doesn't sound anything like my snare, but I don't give a f***. Throw that motherfucker in there. And it'll sound somewhat like this. Boom. The reverse snare is pretty much just a snare bomb in reverse. So you either make your own snare bomb and print it to audio, or you download a snare bomb sample and drop it into your session. You reverse the snare bomb and put the end of the swell where the actual snare hit happens, so that it swells into the hit. These reverse snares are often followed by a regular snare bomb. Remember to throw the rules out the window and experiment. You don't always have to use the same sample for both the swell and the bomb. Fuck around and find out, as the kids say. I'm just going to use the same motherfucker right here. Duplicate the track with the motherfucking event. Let's reverse this. Bring it the fuck over here so that they meet. Reverse cymbals and swells. These are great for transitions into bigger sections of a song. For example, if you've got a chorus that you kind of want to foreshadow and build anticipation for, reverse cymbals and swells are good for this. These are usually pretty short, but again, there are no rules. Think of anything that has a natural decay and consider what it might sound like in reverse. You can also use non-reversed samples with a quick fade in to create a swell, just like you might do on your guitar with your volume knob, like right before an epic riff, like before you come in. But I mean, it could be pretty much any sustained sound. You just draw that in with your volume automation. The fade in makes the swell. The natural decay of a cymbal played backwards also creates a swell. Same sort of thing. Risers are similar to swells in that they generally build in intensity and foreshadow something big. The difference is that they usually rise in pitch, hence the name. These are hugely popular in electronic music, but they can also be used effectively in metal to build tension before you drop the earth on someone. So altogether, yes, I want that one. Okay, so it needs to end along with this one. I want it to like stop on a dime, so boom, done. Yeah, okay, cool. Risers, there's risers. Dissonance is great for making listeners feel uneasy and to build tension before some sort of big payoff. These are some of my favorite sounds of all, and JST has some really fucking good ones. I highly recommend checking out the ones in the JST Inferno sample pack. Have some really good shepherd tones. I use the fuck out of those. Once you get those, if you're familiar with my stuff at all, you'll be like, oh yeah, I've heard that. I don't give a f. It's fine. Sounds great. I think this is my favorite one. I've used this a bunch. I don't give a f. Buy the sample pack and you can use it too. Right there. Let's have it end with the fucking cymbal choke. One more again. Lo-fi effects are typically achieved by applying a bandpass filter to the sound, allowing only part of the frequency spectrum through. I like to apply both a high-pass and low-pass filter and then bring them together to essentially create a bandpass filter. You can then automate these filters to open up the sound if you want. Lo-fi. Let's see, where can we put a lo-fi effect? So there's a couple ways to do this. The classic way is with the fucking equalizer. Okay, so a high pass and a low pass. And then you just fine tune how you fucking want this fucking shit to, where you want to focus the energy. Another way to do this, I like this effect called Warbler from Plugin Alliance. And then it's got a built-in high cut and low cut filter, and you can just basically crank these motherfuckers and get you the sound you're after. Turn this up. Done. Ghost vocals, or reverse reverb. Learn how to make this vocal effect. Okay, so you take your vocal, duplicate it, reverse the duplicate, add reverb, print it, then reverse it again, and line it up with your original vocal. So what you want to do, here's our dry vocal. Learn how to make this vocal effect. What we're going to do is duplicate it, and then we're going to reverse it. We're going to add a bunch of reverb to it. Is that the wrong plugin? No, that's it. Okay, so it's going to sound all dumb because it's in the reverse. But we want the mix all the way 100% wet. We don't want the actual vocal. We just want the reverb. Let's get something pretty big. That might work because it's kind of a darker sound. Let's try that. So we have this effect on. I'm going to do a render in place with the channel settings so that it prints this to the audio render. Boom, there it is. So now we have the printed thing, and then we reverse it again. And we line it up with the original vocal. And you don't have to get it like phase perfect or anything because we didn't leave, it's 100% wet, so we don't have the actual signal in there. You don't have to worry about phase cancellation or anything like that. Let's see what this sounds like. Learn how to make this vocal effect. But they're kind of fighting a little bit. You can kind of hear the reverb's kind of choking out this thing a little bit. We can turn the reverb down, but that kind of ruins the effect. We want to have that kind of loud reverse sound going into it. So to do that, we just have put a compressor on the reverb channel or the reverb track, and then we're going to sidechain it and key it from the original vocal. So we have the sidechain going, Ghost Vox, and then in the sidechain section here, we have external as opposed to internal. And here we go. Learn how to make this vocal effect. And that basically it's just ducking the reverb out of the way when the dry vocal is happening. Shakers and percussion. These are good for adding a subtle dose of extra energy. In some cases, these are a prominent part of the mix and can act as almost like a metronome for some bands. I generally like to keep these subtle as a matter of preference to where you might not even notice them on the first few listens. But again, there are no rules. One way to do that is with an actual shaker. So these can be fun. But there also can be a little bit of a waste of time and effort because there are such things as samples. We're going to go back to the Modern Metal Songwriter Metal Essentials Post-Production Effects pack. And let's go to extra percussion here. I'm going to go with this one. I'm going to grab that motherfucker. Drag it up in here. Bring it up here. Open it the f up. And then let's see. So to begin with, I'm just going to duplicate it on each 8th note. But I think we're going to want to actually do 16th notes. But we don't want every hit to be the same volume. We want like the upstrokes to be a little bit quieter. So I'm going to do 8th notes, get them in line, and then duplicate them and make that duplicate a little bit quieter so the upbeats are a little bit quieter. So there's going to be a little bit off time, but that's okay. Duplicate the fucking track. And then these we're going to slide over a 16th. So these will alternate. These aren't lined up yet, so it's going to sound a little weird. And these other ones we're going to turn down, but first let's line them up a little bit better. Ooh, too far, broski. Let's try this. Cool, and turn this one down. Obviously, they're way too fucking loud, so now we're going to turn them both down now that we have our relative volume. And then that's somewhere right around there is about where I would normally put this. Obviously, the song isn't mixed yet, but this is, I generally prefer to have these just really fucking subtle. Don't forget that you can stack and combine and mix and match samples to create new sounds. Just because you bought a sample pack that other people also have access to doesn't mean that you can't make new sounds, especially if you're combining samples from multiple libraries. If your interface has a loopback feature which loops software output back to one of the inputs, you can use this to grab audio from anything that you play on your computer. There are probably also dedicated programs which allow this, but I've always just used the loopback feature to record sounds from the internet directly into my DAW. Be careful with this though, and don't steal stuff, unless you want to. If it weren't for illegal sampling, we'd be missing out on some pretty classic songs. Just know the risks and proceed accordingly. I'm just gonna grab a fucking random Carl Sagan quote and put it in front of this song. Okay, so we've got this armed. Go to YouTube and hit play.
If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe.
I got invent the universe. Let's just see how that works.
Invent the universe.
So there you go. Then you can grab whatever the you want. Just don't break the law. Or if you do, don't get caught. Stretching audio can be a fun way to get that matrix style effect on things. Learn how to make this. For stutter effects, you can literally chop out pieces of an audio clip. You may have to apply fades to prevent pops and clicks if your DAW isn't set to do this automatically. Just cut stuff out. You want to, kind of experiment with the parts that you're cutting, but there's like tools that are actually made for this too, but this is like the old-fashioned way of doing stuff. You can do this on instruments or whatever. Learn how to make this vocal effect. Distorting things is rad. Learn how to make this vocal effect. Pixelator. This makes things sound like they're in a video game. Learn how to make this vocal effect. Video game sounds. So that's about it. Thanks for watching. I hope that you found some value in this. This topic is fun because there are so many different ways of doing these types of things that I'm really only scratching the surface here. Let me know some of your favorite post-production tricks in the comments if you feel like sharing, or take them to your grave, whatever. That's cool too. You could also maybe like this video and subscribe to my channel if that seems like something that might benefit you. If not, don't do it. Go make music. Okay, bye.